The massive alien ship appeared over New York without warning. Its sleek, crystalline surface reflected the morning sun, casting rainbow patterns across the city's skyscrapers. Earth's military forces scrambled into position, but they might as well have been ants preparing to fight an elephant. Captain James Miller stood at attention in the United Nations Emergency Chamber, his crisp blue uniform a stark contrast to the chaos around him. As Earth's Defense Force commander, he had trained for many scenarios, but first contact wasn't one of them. His weathered hands gripped the podium as the alien delegation materialized in the center of the room. They were tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with metallic skin that seemed to flow like liquid mercury. Their ambassador, who introduced himself simply as first speaker, carried himself with the air of someone meeting children at a playground. People of Earth, the first speaker's voice echoed through the chamber, translated perfectly by their advanced technology. The Galactic Council welcomes you to the greater community of spacefaring races. Miller noticed the slight smirk on the alien's face. It reminded him of his old college professor, who always thought he knew better than everyone else. The first speaker continued, gesturing with his 4-fingered hand. We have been observing your development for some time. Your achievement of basic spaceflight has qualified you for provisional membership. The emphasis on provisional made several human delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. As the first speaker activated a holographic display, 11 other alien races appeared in the projection. The Council consists of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Each has mastered energy weapons, faster than light travel, and quantum computing. Miller watched as images of their weapons floated in the air: sleek rifles that fired bolts of plasma, cannons that could tear apart molecules, and shields that supposedly nothing could penetrate. Then came the moment that would change everything. "And what?" the first speaker asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are these primitive devices your soldiers carry?" Miller looked down at the standard-issue M5 rifle slung across his chest. "This is a kinetic weapon." First speaker. "It uses chemical propulsion to launch metal projectiles at high velocity." The chamber filled with something Miller hadn't expected: laughter. The alien delegates actually laughed, their metallic skin rippling with amusement. "You mean you still throw small pieces of metal at each other?" The first speaker's translator couldn't quite hide his mockery. "How quaint. We abandoned such primitive tools thousands of years ago." One of the other council members, a being that looked like a cross between a mantis and a computer, stepped forward. "Surely you don't expect to defend yourselves with these artifacts." Miller felt his jaw tighten. 20 years in the military had taught him one thing: never underestimate any weapon, no matter how simple it might appear. "We find them quite effective," he said quietly. "Effective?" The first speaker's amusement grew stronger. "Against what?" "Each other. I assure you, Captain, in the greater galaxy, such toys would be useless. Our energy shields can stop particles moving at near-light speed. Your little metal pellets would be insignificant." The human delegates began to murmur among themselves. Miller caught fragments of worried conversations about Earth's defenses being obsolete. Nevertheless, Miller stated firmly, "These are our weapons. Then you shall need to advance beyond them," the first speaker declared. "As part of your provisional membership, you will be required to disarm these primitive devices and adopt proper energy-based weapons. We cannot have members of the Council behaving like savages." Miller noticed something in the first speaker's eyes: not just condescension, but absolute certainty. The kind of certainty that had spelled doom for empires throughout human history. As the meeting concluded and Earth was officially granted its provisional status, Miller couldn't shake a strange feeling. The alien's laughter echoed in his mind, reminding him of every bully who had ever underestimated their victim. He looked down at his rifle again and smiled slightly. Something told him these advanced aliens had forgotten a basic lesson that humanity had learned through countless wars. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective. And sometimes those who laugh first, laugh last. Admiral Tom Wilson was not a man who enjoyed being laughed at. After watching recordings of the first contact meeting for the 5th time, he made a decision that would change humanity's place in the galaxy. "We'll show them exactly what our weapons can do," he announced to the Joint Military Command, his voice steady and firm. The conference room at the Pentagon fell silent. "Sir," one of the generals spoke up, "are you suggesting we challenge the Galactic Council?" Wilson stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the sky orange. "Not challenge. Educate." Within hours, Earth's diplomatic channels buzzed with an unusual request: a formal weapons demonstration at the Movev testing ground. The Council's response came quickly. Amusement mixed with pity, but they agreed. 3 days later, under the scorching desert sun, humanity prepared to prove its worth. The testing ground sprawled across miles of sand and rock, dotted with targets at various ranges. Military personnel from every major Earth nation gathered, bringing their best conventional weapons. The Council representatives arrived in a ship that hovered silently above the ground. First speaker emerged, along with 5 other alien delegates, each wearing what looked like thin, shimmering suits. "Personal energy shields," one of them explained, noticing the humans staring. "Standard protection for civilized beings." Wilson smiled politely. "Of course. Shall we begin?" The demonstration started small. A young sergeant stepped up to the firing line with a standard pistol. The aliens whispered among themselves, their translators off, clearly enjoying what they saw as primitive theater. "First target is standard steel plate, 1 inch thick at 50 yards, the range officer announced. The sergeant fired 3 shots. The aliens didn't even bother to watch the target, instead examining their own equipment with bored expressions. "Next, we have a basic rifle demonstration," Wilson continued, nodding to a team of soldiers. They lined up with various rifles, hunting, military, and precision models. "Really, Admiral?" First speaker interrupted. "We understand you're proud of your heritage, but these displays are hardly necessary. Perhaps we should move on to discussing your transition to proper weapons." Wilson held up his hand. "Just one more demonstration, if you don't mind. Something a bit more interesting." He gestured, and a covered vehicle rolled forward. When the tarp came off, it revealed a modern heavy machine gun mounted on a swivel base. For the first time, one of the alien delegates showed something other than amusement, curiosity. "This weapon," Wilson explained, "fires depleted uranium rounds. Would any of you care to test your energy shields against it?" The aliens looked at each other. First speaker stepped forward, his metallic skin gleaming. "You suggest your primitive projectiles could penetrate our advanced protection. Very well. I will volunteer." "Are you certain?" Wilson asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Absolutely." First speaker moved to stand near a target. "Our shields can deflect particles moving at near light speed. Your weapon will provide an amusing demonstration of the gap between our technologies." Wilson nodded to the gunner. "Single shot only. 20% power." The gun roared, its sound echoing across the desert. The uranium round, traveling at several times the speed of sound, struck first speaker's energy shield. What happened next would be recorded in 1,000 reports and discussed in council chambers for years to come. The shield flared brilliant blue and failed completely. The round passed through the space where first speaker had stood, missing him by inches, and obliterated the steel target behind him. Silence fell across the testing ground. First speaker stood frozen, his metallic skin now a shade paler. The other aliens rushed to check their readings, speaking rapidly in their native languages. "Impossible," one of them muttered. "The kinetic energy, it shouldn't." "Would you like to see what this weapon can do at full power?" Wilson asked quietly. "Or perhaps a demonstration of our other capabilities?" First speaker raised his hand. "That won't be necessary, Admiral." Wilson gazed across the suddenly quiet testing ground. "You see, first speaker, humanity learned something important during our history of warfare. Energy can be deflected. Radiation can be blocked, but mass. He picked up a spent shell casing from the ground. Mass always has its way. The aliens huddled together, discussing rapidly in their own language. When first speaker turned back to Wilson, the contempt in his eyes had been replaced by something else, respect tinged with fear. We may need to reconsider some aspects of Earth's provisional status, first speaker said carefully. Wilson smiled. I think that would be wise. The mood in the Galactic Council chamber had changed dramatically. Gone were the laughs and smirks. Now, the 12 alien representatives sat in uncomfortable silence as they watched the video from the Movav testing ground for the 10th time. Play it again, ordered the council leader, his crystalline body reflecting the dim light of the chamber. The video repeated, a human weapon firing, an unbreakable energy shield failing, and the sheer destruction that followed. Down on Earth, Admiral Wilson sat in his office reading the latest reports. The door opened, and Captain Miller walked in, carrying a thick folder. Sir, you need to see this, Miller said, laying out photographs on the desk. Our satellites caught these images an hour ago. 3 council warships just arrived in orbit. Wilson studied the images. The alien ships looked like giant silver needles against the blackness of space. Interesting timing. The council's officially still reviewing our membership status. That's not all, Miller continued. Our deep space sensors detected energy signatures. They're running combat simulations against Earth-based weapons. Wilson leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. They're scared, James. In the council chamber, the debate had turned heated. The mantis-like representative slammed its appendage on the table. These humans are dangerous. It clicked through the translator. Their weapons ignore our primary defenses. Our entire military doctrine is based on energy shields. The Serpentine council member raised its head. Perhaps we've become too dependent on a single type of defense. These humans, primitive as they are, have shown us a serious flaw in our thinking. First speaker stood silently at the window, watching the stars. The memory of that uranium round passing inches from him still made his metallic skin ripple with fear. Back on Earth, Wilson had called an emergency meeting. Military leaders from around the world gathered in the Pentagon's secure conference room. They're planning something, Wilson addressed the room. Our basic rifles can penetrate their personal shields. Our heavy weapons can tear through their ship defenses. They won't accept this situation for long. A general from India spoke up. We should share our weapons technology with some of the other primitive species. The Council calls many worlds backward because they haven't developed energy weapons. Already done, Miller replied, pulling up a holographic display. We've made contact with 3 other provisional member species. They're very interested in our primitive technology. In deep space, aboard the Council's primary diplomatic vessel, first speaker reviewed the latest analysis. The results were troubling. Not only could human kinetic weapons penetrate their shields, but the simple projectile weapons were also far cheaper and easier to produce than energy weapons. We have a choice, he told his advisors. Either we acknowledge this new reality, or we face a future where our military superiority is no longer guaranteed. One advisor, their skin glowing with agitation, spoke up. There's another option. We could strike now, before they share their weapons with others. Our energy weapons still have superior range. First speaker shook his head. And if we miss with the first strike? Their missiles carry nuclear warheads. Their submarines hide beneath their oceans. They have weapons scattered across their planet. No, a military solution is too risky. On Earth's moon, at the newly established human observation post, a young lieutenant watched the Council ships through a powerful telescope. He noticed something odd about their movement patterns. Sir, he radioed back to Earth, the alien ships, they're maintaining maximum distance from our defense platforms. They're staying just at the edge of our missile range. Wilson received the report with satisfaction. Send a message to the Council, he instructed Miller. Tell them we're ready to demonstrate some of our other capabilities. Perhaps they'd like to see what happens when we test our railguns against starship armor." The message reached the council chamber just as they were debating their next move. First speaker read it and felt his metallic skin grow cold. "It seems," he announced to the chamber, "that we must accept a new reality. The age of energy weapon supremacy is over." As he spoke those words, somewhere in a human weapons facility, a technician loaded a simple brass cartridge into a testing chamber. Sometimes, the old ways were still the best ways. The sound of gunfire echoed across the testing range, a sound that would soon be heard across the stars. Intelligence Officer Mary Cooper knew something was wrong the moment she saw the encrypted data stream. Working late in the Earth Defense Force headquarters, she had been monitoring communications between council ships when she noticed an unusual pattern. "They're hiding something," she muttered, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. The aliens thought their quantum encryption was unbreakable, but they hadn't counted on human ingenuity or human hackers. The decoded message made her blood run cold. 20 minutes later, she burst into Admiral Wilson's office, where he was meeting with Captain Miller. "Sir, we have a serious problem," she said, placing her tablet on his desk. "Several council species are planning to eliminate humanity before we can spread our weapons technology." Wilson studied the data, his face growing grim. "Which species?" "The warriors, the ones who relied most heavily on energy weapons. The mantis-like hunters and the crystalline dominators are leading the movement." Miller leaned forward. "How did you get this information?" "They made a mistake," Cooper explained, pulling up more data. "They're so dependent on their quantum encryption that they never developed simpler security methods. We broke their codes using old-school pattern recognition." Wilson's laugh was without humor. "They keep underestimating the basics." Across the galaxy, aboard a massive hunter warship, war preparations were already underway. General Prime Kexis, his name simplified for human records, addressed his battle fleet. "These humans threaten everything we've built," he clicked to his soldiers. "Their primitive weapons make our defenses worthless. We must strike now, before—" He stopped mid-sentence as alerts blared across his ship. On every screen, classified council military data began appearing. Weapon specifications, shield frequencies, battle plans, everything. Earth had just leaked all their stolen intelligence to every species in the galaxy. Back on Earth, Cooper watched the chaos unfold through intercepted communications. "The other provisional member species are particularly interested," she reported to Wilson, "especially the ones the Council labeled as primitive for using projectile weapons." Wilson nodded. "Send them the technical specifications for our latest railgun designs. Mark it as free technology exchange between developing worlds." The Council chambers erupted into chaos. The leaked data spread faster than anyone could contain it. Species that had been looked down upon for centuries suddenly realized they weren't behind. They had simply taken a different path. First speaker watched his carefully ordered galaxy descend into political turmoil. Who authorized these attacks plans? He demanded, but he already knew. The warrior species had acted on their own. On a dozen worlds, factories that had been retooling to build energy weapons suddenly halted production. Why spend vast resources on complex energy weapons when simple kinetic designs could do the job better? The Hunter battle fleet, originally gathered for a surprise attack on Earth, now faced a different problem. Their energy shields, once thought impenetrable, were now known to be vulnerable to simple kinetic weapons, and those weapons were spreading fast. Cooper's next discovery proved even more dramatic. "Sir," she called Wilson, "the Council's own records show they've been suppressing kinetic weapon research for centuries. They pushed every species toward energy weapons because they were easier to defend against." The news spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Dozens of species had been pushed to abandon their traditional weapons in favor of superior energy technology. Now they knew the truth. Wilson met with Earth's leadership to discuss the situation. "We don't need to fight them," he explained. "We just needed everyone to know the truth." The balance of power is already shifting. In orbit, the Hunter battle fleet began to withdraw. Their perfectly planned surprise attack was now impossible. Too many species had rushed to arm themselves with human-style weapons. First Speaker called an emergency council session. As he prepared his remarks, he received one final message from Earth. It was short and to the point. Perhaps it's time to reconsider the meaning of primitive technology. We look forward to discussing full council membership as equals. Cooper, watching the council ships retreat from Earth orbit, allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes the best weapon wasn't a gun at all. It was the truth. And the truth, like a well-aimed bullet, had just shot straight through the council's shield of lies. The attack came without warning. Earth's newest colony on Proxima b sent out a distress signal at 300 Earth Standard Time. The message was brief. Under attack. Unknown forces. Energy weapons. In his command center, Admiral Wilson watched the emergency transmission with Cooper and Miller at his side. The colony's defense commander appeared on screen, his face lit by explosions in the background. "They're using council technology, but no markings," the commander reported. "3 warships, at least 200 ground troops. They think our defenses are minimal." A slight smile crossed his dust-covered face. "They don't know about the upgrades." Wilson leaned forward. "What's your status?" "We've got 500 colonists in the underground bunkers. And, sir," the commander's smile grew wider, "we've got the new railgun batteries installed last week. Defend the colony. Help is on the way." Wilson turned to Miller. "Though I don't think they'll need it." On the surface of Proxima b, the raiders were getting their first surprise. They had expected an easy target, a primitive human colony with basic defenses. Their intelligence suggested simple projectile weapons and minimal shields. The raid leader, his crystalline form glowing with combat energy, watched in horror as his first wave of troops disappeared under a hail of hypervelocity rounds. The humans weren't using the expected primitive firearms. These were advanced railguns, throwing metal projectiles at speeds that made their energy shields useless. "Fall back," he ordered. "Back to the ships." But the human colonists had no intention of letting them escape. In the colony's defense center, Chief Gunner Roberts watched his targeting display with satisfaction. The raiders had clustered their ships together, confident in their energy shields. "Target locked," he reported. "All batteries, fire." 6 railgun batteries fired simultaneously. 12 tungsten rods, accelerated to 20 times the speed of sound, streaked through the alien ship's energy shields like they weren't even there. In orbit, automated cameras recorded everything. Cooper made sure the footage was broadcasting on all council frequencies. "You know they'll deny involvement," Miller said, watching the feed. Cooper nodded. "That's why we're showing it to everyone. Look at those ships. Hunter design, Dominator weapons. The whole galaxy will know who did this." The battle was over in less than an hour. The raiders never had a chance to use their superior numbers. Their energy weapons, designed to fight other energy weapon users, proved nearly useless against the colony's hardened bunkers. Their shields, calibrated to stop plasma bolts and laser fire, couldn't handle good old-fashioned kinetic impacts. When the dust settled, 300 raiders were dead or captured. Their ships lay in burning ruins across the colony's main valley. The humans had lost no one. In the council chambers, the footage played on endless repeat. First Speaker watched his fellow council members' reactions carefully. The Hunters and Dominators tried to maintain their composure, but their guilt was obvious. This attack, First Speaker announced, was unsanctioned and illegal. The responsible parties will be. The responsible parties are sitting in this chamber. The words came from an unexpected source, one of the previously silent primitive species representatives. "We all know who ordered this attack, and we all know why it failed." Wilson received the council transmission with quiet satisfaction. The raiders' captured equipment proved beyond doubt who had sent them. More importantly, the battle footage showed the entire galaxy just how effective human weapons technology could be. "Sir," Cooper reported, checking her data feeds, "we're getting requests from 27 species. They all want to discuss weapons technology sharing." "The Council won't be able to keep control now," Miller added. "Too many species have seen what our primitive weapons can do." Wilson stood at his window, watching Earth's defense platforms tracking Council ships as they fled the solar system. "Send a message to all Council species," he ordered. "Tell them Earth is hosting a conference on integrated defense technologies next month. All species welcome, especially the primitive ones." In the wreckage on Proxima B, a young colonist picked up a fallen alien energy rifle. Next to it lay a simple human rifle that had helped defend the colony. The choice between complex and simple, between elaborate and effective, had never been clearer. The galaxy was changing. The age of energy weapon supremacy was over, ended not by some new advanced technology, but by the very weapons the Council had laughed at. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and now everyone knew it. Lieutenant John Baker stood before the gathered representatives of 30 alien species. 1 month after the Proxima B attack, Earth's Conference of Progressive Defense had drawn more attention than anyone expected. The conference hall in Geneva buzzed with excitement. Species that the Council had labeled as primitive sat alongside developing civilizations and even some former Council members. They all shared one thing in common. They were tired of being looked down upon. "For too long," Baker began, his voice clear and strong, "the galaxy was divided between advanced and primitive species. Today, we prove those labels meaningless." Behind him, a holographic display showed the schematics for Earth's latest defensive innovations, a combination of kinetic and energy weapons that work together in ways the Council had never imagined. "We don't reject energy weapons," Baker continued. "We integrate them. A railgun working alongside a plasma cannon. Traditional explosives supporting shield technology. The best of both worlds." In orbit above Earth, Admiral Wilson watched dozens of alien ships arriving for the conference. Cooper stood at his side, monitoring their communications. "The Council's falling apart," she reported. 3 more member species have resigned this morning. They're all sending representatives here instead." Wilson nodded. "And our old friends, the Hunters and Dominators, are isolated. No one wants to trade with them now. Their attack on our colony showed everyone their true nature." On the Council's capital world, First Speaker faced a crisis. Half the Council chamber stood empty. The remaining members argued constantly. Their perfect order had shattered. "We should have eliminated them when we had the chance," the Hunter representative clicked angrily. First Speaker turned to him slowly. "That kind of thinking is what brought us here. We forgot the most important law of the galaxy. Adaptation is survival." Back in Geneva, Baker led the alien representatives through Earth's premier weapons facility. They watched in amazement as human engineers demonstrated weapon after weapon. "This is a standard infantry rifle," Baker explained, holding up a sleek weapon. "Kinetic rounds for primary fire, with an underslung energy pulse for shield disruption. Simple, effective, and any species can manufacture it." A serpentine alien raised its head. "The Council told us such combinations were impossible, that mixing weapons technologies would be unstable." Baker smiled. "They were wrong about a lot of things." In space, more changes were happening. The first joint human-alien military exercise showed just how effective the combined technologies could be. Ships using both kinetic and energy weapons proved far more capable than those relying on just one type. Captain Miller, commanding one of the joint operation ships, watched alien crews learning to use traditional weapons alongside their energy tools. "It's like teaching them to write with both hands," he told Wilson over the comm. "They're amazed by how much more they can do." The conference's success sparked a revolution across the galaxy. Species that had been forced to abandon their traditional weapons began reclaiming their heritage. Others started developing new combinations of old and new technology. In his office, Wilson reviewed reports from across known space. Trade routes were shifting. New alliances were forming. The rigid hierarchy of the council was being replaced by something more flexible, more equal. "Sir," Cooper interrupted his reading, "the remaining council members have sent a message. They want to talk about restructuring the council itself." Wilson looked up. "And their conditions? They want Earth to help lead the new council. They say we've proved that progress doesn't mean abandoning the past." Baker ended the conference with a demonstration that would be remembered for generations. On the testing range outside Geneva, he fired an ancient Earth rifle, a simple bolt-action design from the 20th century. The bullet punched through an energy shield that had been considered impenetrable. "This is why we succeed," he told the watching aliens. "We remember our roots. We build on them. We don't abandon what works just because something new comes along." As the conference closed, ships from 30 species lifted off from Earth, carrying with them not just new weapons, but a new way of thinking. The galaxy was transforming, and at its heart was a simple truth that the Council had forgotten. True advancement comes not from rejecting the past, but from building upon it. And sometimes, the most powerful weapons are the ones you've had all along. 1 year after the first alien ship appeared over New York, Admiral Wilson stood in the reformed Galactic Council chamber. The room had changed. Where once ornate energy crystal displays had dominated the walls, now a simple Earth rifle hung beside advanced plasma weapons, a symbol of how far they'd come. The new council looked nothing like the old one. Species once labeled primitive sat alongside the most advanced civilizations. The circular chamber had no high seats, no special positions. Everyone sat as equals. Wilson remembered the laughter from that first meeting. No one was laughing now. "The vote is complete," first speaker announced, his metallic skin gleaming under the chamber lights. "Earth is confirmed as a permanent member of the Council Leadership Committee. Admiral Wilson will serve as humanity's first High Representative." Cooper and Miller, standing behind Wilson, exchanged satisfied glances. Their long journey had reached its end, or perhaps its true beginning. "Our first proposal," Wilson addressed the chamber, "concerns the sharing of defensive technologies. No more artificial divisions between primitive and advanced weapons. Every species has something to contribute." Across the galaxy, the changes were already visible. On the Hunter homeworld, once proud energy weapon factories now produced hybrid designs. Their warriors learned to use simple kinetic rifles alongside their plasma cannons. Their ships carried railguns next to their quantum disruptors. The Dominators, who had once sneered at primitive weapons, now led research into combining crystal technology with traditional explosives. Their new weapons proved more effective than anything they'd made before. In Earth's solar system, the first Joint Defense Fleet patrolled space. Ships from 20 different species worked together, each bringing their own strengths. Energy shields protected against some threats, while thick armor stopped others. Every vessel carried both kinetic and energy weapons. The old Council's greatest mistake, Wilson continued, wasn't their technology. It was their pride. They forgot that evolution doesn't just mean replacing the old with the new. Sometimes it means finding new ways to use old tools. First speaker nodded in agreement. His own species had learned this lesson the hard way. Their perfect energy shields, once thought unbeatable, now worked alongside physical armor. Both had their place. Both had their purpose. On the training grounds of Earth's new Galactic Defense Academy, young officers from 100 worlds learned to use every weapon in the galaxy's arsenal. Baker, now promoted to Academy Commander, watched alien cadets practicing with human rifles. "Remember," he told them, "there is no primitive or advanced. There is only effective and ineffective." In orbit above Earth, Miller commanded the new flagship of humanity's fleet. The massive vessel carried every type of weapon humanity had ever invented, from simple chemical rockets to the most advanced rail guns. Each had its purpose. Each had its place. Cooper's intelligence network had evolved too. The quantum computers of advanced species worked alongside simple encryption methods that had served Earth for centuries. Together, They created security that neither system could achieve alone. In the council chamber, Wilson concluded his address. 1 year ago, you laughed at our weapons. You called us primitive. Today, we all stand together, stronger because we finally understand a simple truth. Progress doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. He gestured to the rifle on the wall. This simple weapon taught the galaxy a lesson in humility. But more importantly, it taught us all that true wisdom means keeping what works, even as we reach for the stars. First speaker rose to stand beside him. The galaxy has changed, he announced. The old divisions are gone. We face the future together, not as advanced or primitive species, but as equals. Outside the chamber, on 1,000 worlds, the galaxy continued to transform. Ships carrying both energy and kinetic weapons patrolled trade routes. Soldiers trained with every weapon ever invented. Scientists combined ancient principles with new discoveries. And in museums across the galaxy, they placed a simple Earth rifle next to the most advanced energy weapons, a reminder to future generations that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. The Council had laughed at human guns. They weren't laughing anymore. But perhaps they had learned something more valuable than any weapon: the danger of pride and the strength that comes from remembering your roots. The end.